We also just a few days ago had the preseason coaches poll released, and I think very similar to what the discussion has been for the entire offseason, coming off of a situation in which Oklahoma was a heavy favorite last year. Baylor, Oklahoma State obviously played a down to the wire, down to the final inch Big 12 championship game after Oklahoma State had just won a narrow game against Oklahoma, in which the Sooners would have been in the Big 12 championship game, just kind of, and then with the change of coaching staffs at Oklahoma, new quarterback, it's a pretty reflective here in the preseason coaches poll what the thought is, and it's a tight 3-team, maybe 4-team race. OU starts at 9, Baylor 10, Oklahoma State 11, all lined up. I screwed up on the typo there, but anyway, Baylor 10, Oklahoma State 11. And the interesting note about Texas is that the Longhorns received one first place vote from these votes are public. I'm surprised that somebody hasn't looked that up and found it.
Yeah, I've heard some debate. I wouldn't. I mean, I would not even in the least bit be surprised if it was Nick Saban that did it. Just to how he is about rat poison and to motivate his team for that week 2 game. But I don't know. I mean, it's all. I think it would be a lot of speculation at this point. I'd heard some, and this was from. Just to give them the credit from Gabe and Teddy Lehman that I think it was Gabe Eichert that mentioned, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, it could have been Lincoln Riley, just a last little peace offering to Oklahoma but no, I think it's in terms of Oklahoma, Baylor, and Oklahoma State, I think it's one of those things. Not necessarily surprised where Oklahoma is. I mean, not really surprised where either of those three are. I think it is interesting that they're all in a cluster there, 9, 10, and 11. So I think it might be one of those things that we're not completely sure who the best team is, or who those best three are. So we're just going to put them in a cluster and give Oklahoma the benefit of the doubt because they've been the better team, through the years, obviously. But I think it's interesting that this Big 12, and certainly we'll get to our predictions, here in the next couple of weeks. But the Big 12, I think, is more balanced than it's been in a long time. I think you legitimately probably have 5 teams that could make it to Jerry World for the Big 12 championship game. You've got Oklahoma, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Texas, and I would throw Kansas State in there as well as teams that potentially could that could make it. But I mean, you've got some other teams in there as well, Mark. I mean, Iowa State seems to really just love the underdog role, and so maybe they were in a little bit of an unfamiliar role last year, and it certainly didn't work out for them. I think they're back to where Matt Campbell and that team likes to be, and more of a undervalued, underappreciated team. So yeah, I mean, and then you've got some other teams, like TCU. What does that look like with with Sonny Dykes patrolling the sidelines? You've got Texas Tech with Joey McGuire. So you've got a lot of new faces, and you've got a lot of teams that have, that are coming in with that, that new coach gives that new sense of energy coming into the season. So, it'll be really interesting to see how this conference shakes out. But in terms of the preseason coaches poll, this is about where I would expect Oklahoma to be at. I was sort of expecting both I think the AP comes out, is it Monday, or maybe over the weekend or something soon. But I mean, I think it was just the whole thing is just laughable that Texas has it has to be, you almost feel like it has to be a joke to give them a number one vote. But no, I mean, I think it's fair for Oklahoma to be right where they're at. That would I expect like number 7 to 10, somewhere in that neighborhood. for Oklahoma. So we'll see how that goes. I think it's they, from a national perspective, I saw that they pushed back at least a little bit their the first college football rankings of the year, and so this means, this is just for us to talk about. It doesn't really mean too much, just yet, but yeah, and I think USC came in at number 15, if I remember correctly, 14 or 15. So yeah, it's really interesting. It will be very interesting to see the difference between the writers versus the coaches. And as we know, sometimes the coaches, I don't know how often it is that the coaches even vote. The head coaches even vote here. It might be an admin or someone someone else within the program that actually does that as opposed to the head coach.
Yeah, Jason, you bring up the Texas anomaly there with the number one vote. That's even underlined even more because there's only 3 other teams that got number one votes. The number 4 team in the country didn't even get a first place vote. The number 4 team in the country,
Yeah.
Clemson, and then there's Texas with 1. Uh, People are, I look at it this way. This is my opinion. People can vote for whomever they want. It's a preseason poll.
Right.
And until there are games played that you have to justify your vote with substance, with results on the field. Of course, you can't just vote whomever you want after games are played. It has to be justified with results. Hey, you can vote Kansas number 1. I don't, I don't really care. I you know, and then there are also, and we've had this conversation before, basically 2 different ways to view it or approach it. One would be, these are who I believe are the 25 best teams in the country, first best, second best, third, fourth, etc., down to 25. And then there are other people that look at the schedule and try to make a prediction. They're trying to basically predict or project, this is what I think the final 25 is going to look like at the end of the season.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's all I think it's all about perspective, as far as that goes. And I don't. I mean, I think it's fun. It's fun to talk about. Interesting to discuss. What I mean, and I don't necessarily really have any, just going just about the poll just in general. I don't really have um, anything that I would just adamantly disagree with in terms of the top 10. I think the spread between the distance between number one and number two, I think it should be a lot closer, in my opinion, and what it is. I mean, I understand why. Obviously, with Alabama's done it year in and year out, but um, I think the margin is much closer between Alabama and Ohio State than it was really, that has really been provided here within this poll. So that'll be interesting to see what that looks like on the AP side, as well. But as we talked about a little bit last week, I'm pretty high on Ohio State this year, so it will be it will be interesting. I think Alabama has even a little tougher schedule than um, than Ohio State does. And I can pull it up here, but I know that Alabama goes to Texas. I think they could go to Tennessee. There's a couple of other decent road trips that they have that they have here that I think is a little bit over the course of the year. I think it's a little bit more um, tough um, than what Ohio State's is. Just
Yeah, and just thinking back to last year, since the home road alternates, Bama has Texas A&M at home. Yeah, they should be going to Tennessee this year. They're going to Texas, of course. They should be going to Ole Miss this year. They should be going to Arkansas this year
Arkansas.
and LSU.
Yeah, Arkansas and Ole Miss are the two that I was thinking of road games. So, when you look at, when you look at Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss. I mean, I think those are not, I think those are tough road games to navigate and still go undefeated. So wouldn't be surprised to see a loss in there somewhere. I just hope it's not the Texas, or we'll never hear the end of it. But could certainly see a loss coming in there somewhere.